I'm Susan Clare, GourmetQuilter, and today I thought I'd have a little chat with you about selvedges. Now, selvedges are the edge of the piece of fabric. When we buy fabric, there's usually a piece of something along the edge that tells you who's made the fabric, often who's designed the fabric. Quite often, if there's colours involved, there's little colour dots on the fabric of the colours that are used within the quilt. And quite often these are quite helpful because they can help us match up colours that we want to use with those fabrics together. And other than that, quite often we tend to discard the selvage. Not all of us, some of us do, some of us don't. Selvedges haven't necessarily been an important part of what we use when we sew. There's a couple of reasons for that. They're very utilitarian, they need to be there to have an edge for the fabric. They're also quite often made out of a slightly different weave right close to the edge. They've often got little holes in where they've been attached to the weaving loom and things like that. And very often they also have a stronger, they used to call it a gimp thread. I'm not quite sure what they do these days. Things are a little bit different sometimes. But sometimes they're slightly heavier thread and a slightly tighter weave right to the very edge. And that's just to hold all the fabric nice and firm when it's all being woven on the loom. And this is all great because what we end up with is a really nice fabric with an edge that we can trim off because we don't want to use it. That heavy thread and the slightly tighter weave sometimes can shrink when we wash it, so often we tend to discard it because we don't want it involved in our clothing or our quilt or whatever it is that we're sewing with, because it might shrink and it would then distort things and it will sort of make the edges a little bit funny and cause some other disruption to the fabric, which is not really helpful. However, we can still bypass some of these little problems. In fact, we can incorporate some of them. I find that selvedges in general, whilst a little overlooked, can have an awful lot to say for themselves. They have a lot of words on them, and we love words. Well, some of us love them more than others, I know that. And so I just thought I'd go through some suggestions of things you might do with some selvedges rather than just simply discarding them. If you don't want to use them, somebody else may want them. You might be able to do some sort of exchange with somebody. You might find that it's actually more fun than you thought to use your selvedges. We can do lots and lots of things. When I'm cutting up fabrics into strips for squares and things, I often have pieces like this left over which are quite usable as a piece of fabric, and I could simply cut a strip and just discard the narrow part with the selvage on, or I can leave it like that until I know what I want to do with it, and then I can use as much of that as I want to. But look how exciting these words are. On here it says zip it. Well, how much fun could we do with zip it? And there's of course other words and things. This one is crimson blues. This one is odds and ends and wheels. And this one has got fiesta and dreaming. So you can just pull out a word and use it in some way. There's so much going on. These ones here are by me and my sister designs. Well, maybe you've got a sister and you might want to put in me and my sister. So you can use these words. How exciting is that? And I've got a couple of examples of ways that I have used the words. But before I show you those, I just thought it would just be interesting to show you some of the things that you can do. Now, there is a group of fabrics, the batiks, that don't have a written selvage on them. This is usually a record when the fabrics are printed on the regular fabrics. On the batiks, because they're all hand printed, they don't have anything like that. They're not going through a machine that's repeat printing things. They're all manually printed, but they've still got the selvage in the sense that they've got that heavier edge and they've got it woven right out to the edge, and there's still just that chance that it possibly could shrink. You may want to test some of them out. But look how amazing that is that the colour comes right to the edge. So we can use those as a piece of fabric as well. So don't despair, it's not all wasted. We can do things like just simply join them together. So some of these, as you can see, the selvage is here, and I've got that amount of fabric. So I've left that and used it. I've simply overlapped the fabric and stitched it in place. And now I can create something like that, and I could make some fabric out of that. I could make quilt blocks out of that. I can make pockets. I can make coasters, mug mats, table runners, bags, really pretty much anything. I think the next thing will be a hat. So that's a way of using them so that you're seeing some of the colour as well. Sometimes there's not so much colour, they're narrower pieces, so I've joined a few of those bits here, but there's still usually just enough to get a little bit of the colour showing, and it's kind of fun. They may not be interesting in themselves, but as a piece of fabric, I find that quite interesting. and you can cut those up and do whatever you like. Some are very exciting, of course. There's some super exciting selvedges out there. This one here, when I had my first line of fabrics printed by Hoffman Fabrics, as you can see, it has got GourmetQuilter on there. And now how exciting was that? I was almost as excited by the selvage as I was by the whole line. Just to see that whole thing in print was just amazing for me. And then, so I've got another piece of that same selvage, but from a different piece of fabric from the range here. And this one is a whole lot longer. I was cutting long borders from this piece of fabric. So I just trimmed off the selvage first so that I would have that long piece available to use for something in one long piece in case that's what I wanted to do. So you can see that you can have exciting selvedges, and then when I was making some samples using that range of fabrics, I made this little bag here. I've just incorporated some of the selvage from that onto there, and I have done the same on this little bag here. This is a little bag that I made to put my tablet in with a little snap closure, and again I've popped the selvage because it was that line of fabrics on there. Sometimes I do that same thing on the back of quilts. So I've made a couple of quilts here with a particular line of fabric that I wanted to record on the back of them. So this fun quilt here, but it's the back I want to show you more than the front. Unusual, I know. Because when I was making the back, I pieced the back because I didn't have one big piece large enough at that stage. And so in here, I've incorporated all the selvedges of the fabrics that I've used inside that quilt. And I thought that was a great way of recording what the fabrics are in that quilt. And sometimes there's several of them like that, and sometimes we have smaller pieces of fabric and we don't get selvage on everything. But this quilt here, I have also done a similar thing, but not quite the same. So this is my roadwork quilt, which is kind of fun with all these roadwork fabrics and signs. And on the back of this one, I just incorporated one of the fabrics when I was putting the backing on and things, and it's in there, it's quilted over, and I've bound over the edge of it and everything, but the same thing. So I've incorporated a piece of the fabric from the front with the selvage on it so that I know which line of fabrics that has come from. That may not matter to you, but it mattered to me at that particular time. And so you can see selvages have a whole lot to say. So you might find that you're storing selvages and you're thinking, oh, what am I going to do with all these? But pop them in a nice container, and then it's just exciting, and you just want to go to it and you want to have a look in there, and you might be thinking, oh, I just need a word for something, and oh, I'm going to do a sea quilt, and look, there's a word that says ocean here, or ocean view if you want the whole lot, and all those sorts of things. I had a bit of fun with a friend one day. We were having a little sewing day together. It's a little while ago now, and we made up this fun little dress. It's on a little metal hanger, and it's in a box frame that I hang on the wall. And so I've had a little fun just playing with this, but I found this wonderful selvage here that just said pigtails and pixie dust. It was obviously that particular range of fabrics. It was white, so I've tea-dyed it so that it toned in with everything else. There's another piece, I'm not sure if you can see all this, but I've sewn on the skirt down there called The Teacher's Pet. And so it's these words that are just wonderful that you can incorporate into something else. And how exciting is that? Selvages are just the best. We can't use them for everything, as I said. They may shrink. You may want to test a few if you're not too sure about that. So have a little think about things like that. But I just wanted to give you some ideas of ways of using what sometimes we just discard. And it need not necessarily be discarded. So we've talked about all those and that exciting one there that says GourmetQuilter. And so black and white ones are really fun. So another thought, so we can make fabric like this, and if you've got longer bits, of course you can make it bigger. If you've got smaller bits, they can be squares. And so I've done one here that is actually just done as a square. I made it to the size of a 5-inch square, and I've teamed it with a 5-inch square, and I've actually done the sewing, but I haven't cut it yet, to make just some half square triangles, so that you can see you can just create your own fabric out of pieces that perhaps you might not have thought to use. So just give those a quick press so that you can see that it's very usable. It kind of comes out as a bit of a stripe when you do it like I have with those colours in it. But how exciting is it that you can create your own pieces of fabric using some of those bits that we perhaps didn't really consider as being all that useful. And so another thought would be, if you've got some pieces of batting left over, often there's leftover small bits of batting. This is cotton batting, it's quite thin, it's nice to use, all sorts of sizes and shapes. You might think up something you can use those sizes for and stitch the selvedges straight onto the batting. So I've just stitched them straight on, I've just overlapped them in exactly the same way as I have here, where they're just overlapping enough to cover. Make sure you're leaving enough of a seam in behind there. But I've done them with all these black and white ones, which I kind of thought were quite fun. And now that's all ready for me to put a backing behind it. I can do some quilting on it if I want to. You could make a pocket, a table runner, you could make a little pouch. If you just lined that and folded that up, there's a little pouch all ready to go. And if we did it up the right way, the words would even be up the right way. How's that? So there's just a lot of fun to be had with selvedges who quietly have an awful lot to say for themselves. Think of the words, think of the way you can use some of them, or just use them as a piece of fabric, create your own fabric. What more can I say? Have some fun with the selvedges.